Hey everyone, I'm Kevin. This is the In My Head podcast. Thanks so much for checking out another episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like, a subscribe, share it. If you're not on YouTube, go check our YouTube channel out sometimes. Sometime a lot of people like watching it versus listening to it, but if you're only listening to it, you can still support us by giving us a 5-star rating, a review, share it with other people. And yeah, I'd really appreciate that. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to further support us, you can consider being a monthly donor by going to patreon.com/inmyheadpodcast. You can donate as little as $1 a month. 100% of your donation will go to supporting this podcast and helping us get more episodes out more frequently for people. The next, if you like CBD products, you can purchase them through this link, and a portion of your sales will go to supporting the podcast. The last one, we're not getting paid by these guys, but we love what they're doing and they're stoked on our podcast. Go to betterhelp.com/inmyhead. They're offering our listeners a free week of online therapy that you can cancel anytime. You can change your therapist at any time without any penalty or anything. So check them out, betterhelp.com/inmyhead. Thank you so much for listening. This episode I'm stoked on. I've been wanting to do since I first started this podcast episode, and it's all about social media and its effects on mental health. I don't come out on the end of this saying you should get rid of social media, but just finding a healthy way to interact with it. And even taking breaks here and there is very positive, and just finding a good way to engage with it. And so I hope you enjoy this episode. Kind of long. I talk about a lot of different things that I've researched and articles I've read, but it's all centered around make it a positive experience for yourself and for your loved ones. So I hope you enjoy this episode. You're listening to the In My Head podcast, a place for open discussions about mental and physical health. This is not meant to be a diagnosis or treatment plan, but a safe place to share ideas, hear personal stories, and learn from trained professionals. Our number one goal is to remove the stigma surrounding mental health and provide resources for those struggling, as well as education for those who want to help their loved ones. Difficult subjects of mental illness, suicide, addiction, and abuse are discussed on this podcast. Viewer discretion is advised. Thanks for listening, and welcome to the In My Head podcast. All right, so this episode is all about social media and its effect on our mental health. I'm not one of those people that feels everybody should get off of social media, because I really think there are a lot of benefits from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all these things, TikTok, even all these things that people do find joy in. I think that you can, as long as you have a healthy relationship with it. But what I've been fascinated with is studying its effects on mental health, because there's no denying, even though social media is a very new thing, it's like 10 years old or so. So in reality, to like human beings, it is a very new thing. And in decades to come, there will be a lot more research being able to correlate how this affects human behavior. And I know a lot of studies are going on right now with it, but there have already been a lot of research and study coming out trying to correlate it to how it's affecting us as a society, how it's affecting our mental health. And so those are things I want to dive into, and how you can still have a positive relationship without leaving it behind. You might listen to this episode and get to the end and be like, you know what? Yeah, like social media is ridiculous for me. I don't want it. I don't want that in my life. And I've been in those phases too of life. And they've been great to take breaks from. And you might get to the end of this and be like, I have a healthy relationship with social media. I don't need to do anything. If you're like me, you'll come out of the end of all this and just see ways that you can tweak it to make it a better thing for you. And so honestly, over the course of like a year, I have taken notes. I've read books, read articles, and done these, just read studies and stuff on social media. And I've just taken notes over the time. I also subscribe to this weekly, it's a daily, like Monday through Friday. It's called the Daily Dad. It's like Daily Stoic Philosophies, how it applies to being a dad. Daily Stoic is another one that's Daily Stoic stories and quotes and just philosophies. But I love the Daily Dad because they talk a lot about being, they talk a lot about being present as a parent. And those are some of the things I took notes on that I want to share with you today. And just other things, other books I've read, other things I've read that talk about social media, how to make it healthy for yourself. So starting out, like, it all depends on who you talk to. You could talk to certain therapists, certain teachers that would straight up say, social media is destroying our society. It's a bad thing. You need to get rid of it. Then you talk to somebody like Gary Vee, go to his Instagram page. Social media is the best thing that has ever been invented. and people like him are making money on it, doing really well. Just like most things, I think personally, is just my opinion, I think most things fall somewhere in the middle. And that's how I feel about social media. I think it's one of the greatest things that has come to pass. So many people have been able to start businesses, make money, start nonprofits, start these podcasts, all these things through social media that have been a great thing. On the other hand, there is so much more bullying that takes place because of social media. There's so many unhealthy, pointless, and inefficient conversations that happen because of social media. And there's no denying the increased suicide rates that have happened because of the advent of social media. So you have these two ends of the spectrum. And sorry, since I'm doing this episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see a few jump cuts since I'm doing this by myself. So sorry about that. I'll try to cut out the fluff, the stuff that doesn't need to be in here. But so you have these two ends of the spectrum when it comes to social media. One being it's the best thing in the world. One, it's the worst thing that has been invented. And for me, I find myself somewhere in the middle of all of that. And so I just want to start. I've written down about 12 things that I've studied about social media and just quotes and different things that really bring to light for me where social media fits within the spectrum of mental health. And you might, and maybe just listen to this and come to the end and think about how the social media applies to you and whether it's a good thing, something needs to be altered or whatever. So I've written down some of these emails I've gotten from the Daily Dad, Daily Stoic, some types of Stoic philosophies. And one of my favorite things that they teach in Stoic philosophy is this idea of being in the present, because that is all we have, is our present moment. I've talked about this a lot. Where you live in the past. People with depression tend to live in the past, filled with regret, and they're filled with frustrations of their past or how things haven't gone the way they expected them to go. People with anxiety tend to live in the future, fear over hypotheticals and things that are out of their control. And so this idea of living in the present is living right in that healthy middle, because that's all we have is right now. So this email on the Daily Dad, it says, "This moment right in front of you is a gift. It might not feel like it, not with bills to pay or traffic to wait through, not with a colicky baby or a resentful teenager that refuses to give you a rest. But indeed, these are wonderful moments, certainly better than not having this moment at all." Perfectly said. Living in the moment, this is all we have. It's better that we have this moment than we don't have this moment at all. And so the next thing from the Daily Dad, it says, this is how it relates to social media and parenting. And that's how I'm going to end this podcast. I'm going to end this episode talking about it all starts with us, whether we're parents or not. It all starts with us making the healthy changes to our own mental health and how it's going to affect our friends, family, our kids, those in our direct circle, because we all tend to rub off on each other. So this next part says, it's all about being in the present moment. And I have fallen into this so many times. So I hope whenever I talk about this, if it gets preachy at all, just keep in your mind, I've been guilty of almost every single thing I'm going to read in this episode. And so at no point is it that I'm perfect at these things and that if you do these things, you're a bad person. Obviously, that's not the case. And that's not what I'm saying, because I've done all these things. And so it's helped me a ton to read these and acknowledge it when I do it myself, to change those unhealthy habits into things that are more constructive for me and for my family. So this one from Daily Dad says, "Yeah, you're giving your son a bath, but you have your phone out. Yeah, you took your daughter to the park, but you're checking fantasy football scores while you push her on the swing. Yeah, you got the whole family together for dinner, but are any of you really present? Or are you lost to social media? It's not enough to just be around your kids. You have to actually be there. That means putting away your phone. That means putting away their phone, if they have one. They deserve phone-free time from you. You deserve phone-free time with them. So try to limit your dependence on your smartphones as much as possible. Get a landline at home," which I don't really care to do, but get a landline at home so you don't carry your cell phone around at home. Stop using your phone as an alarm clock. Charge it in some inconvenient place so it's out of sight, out of mind. Commit in the mornings, for instance, not to check your phone for your first 30 minutes after waking up. Or put it away from dinner until the kid's bedtime. Make up some rules that give you phone-free time, that give your kids phone-free dad time. So obviously, let me turn this down a little bit. So obviously what I just read is relating to being a dad, but I take these as relating it to being a parent and just being a person in general. Again, I've done what I'm about to say, I've done before. But one of my biggest pet peeves is when I'm in the middle of a conversation with somebody, especially like explaining something, and they pull their phone out and they kind of pretend like they're still listening to you, but they're also checking their phone. I've totally done this to people, but I try so hard to be conscious of this now, and I try never to do that. When somebody's talking to me, I never try and pull my phone out, or if I just say, hey, I'm so sorry, this is a work thing, if I have to do it. But if I feel a buzz or something and somebody's talking to me, I'm not going to check it. It just is a way of inefficient conversation and makes that person feel what I'm saying to you really isn't that important because you're checking your phone. And I know there's those extenuating circumstances, like you're waiting for a call or maybe some type of emergency happening and you're waiting for an update or something with work. And that's understandable. A lot of times in that case, you can just do it ahead of time. Like, hey, I'm so sorry if I check my phone, I'm just waiting for this thing to happen. So I hope you know I'm not like uninterested in what you said. I've literally said that to people before. But that's always tough for me if I'm explaining something and someone pulls their phone out. They're just like, yeah. And then you kind of tell like the main part of the story and there's no reaction. Then they'll kind of be like, oh yeah. Like, we'll say that again. I'm kind of just like, I'm kind of over it. Maybe that's like immaturity or pride on my part. But I just feel that is like, kind of showing somebody that their time, their story, their life experience isn't really worth your time because you're more interested in what your phone is notifying you of, which is 90% of the time not important. So that's one of the first things I do when I'm in a conversation. I'm trying to consciously just be present in their conversation and not be thinking about what updates I'm getting, what in reality unimportant notifications I'm most likely receiving. And when you're done with the conversation, just check it out and move on. So this for me is huge. How many times I have, we do phone-free dinner at our house. But I've been caught, but that comes from me and my wife making mistakes of kind of having our phone there, whether we're doing work. Between my wife and I, we manage like 4 different social medias. And so she has her personal one, I have my work one, the podcast one, and we run a side business. So it's kind of impossible for us not to be on social media. We're trying to grow businesses and I'm trying to provide resources through the podcast. And so it's very easy just to have that available at all times because you're like, I have so much going on and so much to check. And so it's so easy to do that in important times like dinner time. These are such rare times. Dinner time as a family, like that should almost be a sacred moment of no phones where you really want to dig into what your kids are into, get into what they're into, like what they're like be interested in the music they're into and all that stuff. And that's easy for me to say. My oldest is a 9-year-old, but I have 4 kids and we're trying to set that precedence early on of being present at dinner and stuff. And we fail, I probably fail more than I succeed in this, but I feel like I'm constantly conscious of trying to be that present parent when it comes to these things. And honestly, it comes from trial and error. I've read these things. I'm like, yeah, I've literally had my son in a bath and I'm just reading my phone while he's playing, trying to get my attention. But then there's been times that I haven't, and I've been really, conscious or lucky in that moment to put my phone down or not even take it with me and talk to them and actually have an experience with them. For me, probably one of the hardest times for me to put my phone down and be present with my kids is at the end of the day, we're getting our kids to bed, they're laying down. That's when I tend to just jump on my phone and get any leftover work stuff done, social media stuff, getting like a post for this podcast ready for the next day. I tend to do that at night. That's when I tend to do those things. So if my kids are trying to talk to me, sometimes they're telling me stories and I'm just like, hey, just go to bed. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And I do get like parents have to have rules. You got to get your kids to bed and you can't just have them up nonstop. You have to have rules. But at the same time, there's a difference between that and letting your child tell you something that is important to them. Like, hey, Dad, I want to do this tomorrow. There's been times I'm like, yeah, just tell me tomorrow. But is it that important that I just stay connected to my phone for that extra 10 seconds, which if I would have just listened to them and let them get it out, it probably would have just been quicker. They would have got it out and we would have, been able to have one last connection as a parent and child before bedtime. So those are the things that I'm personally working on, realizing that everything I'm doing on my phone, most of it can wait. But these moments, these fleeting moments with your children, your friends, your family, your spouse, even your own time is so sacred. These are fleeting moments. Those are moments that you will have other opportunities, but they're missed opportunities that you won't get back. You will have, and I'm not saying when you miss an opportunity, this is a look into my mind. When I make those mistakes, I tend to just fester on them for a long time. Like, I blew it, and I start to get down on myself as a parent. In reality, you will have another chance, but you can also catch those moments and capitalize on those moments when your child is reaching out to you and wants your attention, and don't give them that half-assed attention where you're looking at your phone, they're talking to you and you're kind of like, yeah. Like this is all about being present. And so that's what I loved about this email from the Daily Dad. Okay, so number 3, this one is from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. I probably pronounced that completely wrong because I don't speak German, but he was a German writer and statesman, and he said, always hold fast to the present. Every situation, indeed every moment, is of infinite value, for it is the representative of a whole eternity. So every situation, indeed every moment, is of infinite value because it's a moment you're never going to get back. So that goes along with what we were talking about before. A quick story of living in the present. I could talk all day about opportunities I've missed to be present when my kids are talking to me or I'm connecting with my spouse, and all things that I'm so much more conscious of now, and I try to be every single day. But there's an experience one time, my kids were going to bed, and my daughter was telling me we had our 2 oldest kids before COVID, we had them in jujitsu, and they loved doing it. I realized after a while, this was like almost a year ago, I was slipping into these experiences, and I still do it, but I was slipping into these moments of like my kids talking to me and me trying to work or do something at the exact same time, and they would be talking to me, and I'd really be trying to do 2 things at once, which is basically impossible. And I remember just stopping, and my daughter was telling me this story about being in jujitsu, and I remember just stopping and looking right at her and just looking deep into her eyes while she told me this story, telling me she was like the jujitsu champion of the day. Like she took down these boys, she did this, and she was like so strong. And knowing my daughter naturally has, my genetics have rubbed off a lot on her of things of like OCD and just very self-analytical and very hard on herself. And it just hit me in that moment. Like, your daughter is connecting with you. Like, at the time she was 8 years old, she's connecting with you. She's trying to talk to you. You are the person that she looks to as a parent, as like her example and how she models her worldview after right now. And I know that sounds like a little too deep when your child is just talking to you, but it was one of those things that hit me in the moment. And I remember just looking deep in her eyes while she was telling me this story. And it was wild how when your child, when you are on their level connecting with them and you're giving them 100% of your attention, it's amazing like the things that will happen that are beyond just the typical just willy-nilly conversations that you have every day. But I remember just hearing her story and just being like, that is so awesome. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, you're going to be like a jujitsu master, and just like talking about these things that might seem in the moment, just like in the past, I could have just said, hey, let's go to bed. Tell me this story tomorrow. I got stuff to do. Hey, I got stuff to do. And I still do that. And parents have to do that because we only have so many hours in a day to accomplish what we need to. But there's been so many times where I've just paused and my kids are talking to me and just looking them right in the eyes and giving them 100% of my undivided attention. Doesn't matter what I have to do at the moment, but doing that and just feeling grateful that I had that moment with my kids, just me and them. We have 4 kids, so there's a lot of times we're all together in a group. And so it's that much more important to connect with people on a one-on-one basis. And regarding social media, that's where a lot of that breakdown is because there's this lack of connection one-on-one anymore because we don't see or hear people. And we've all read that this huge percentage of human communication is nonverbal. It's in body language. It's where my eyes looking. It's what are my hands doing? What is my chest open to this? Are my arms folded? Am I closed off to you? All of these things that you can't read into when you're reading on social media hence why so many conversations devolve into dehumanizing each other and saying cruel things to each other, because we don't have a huge percentage of body language and verbal cues and social cues that we can pick up when we're in person with somebody. And so that's why, the keyboard warriors, and we say things that we don't mean, and also things that we can't take back. And that's why a lot of friendships are destroyed just from these basic social media interactions, which is really sad, because the majority of the time when you talk to somebody face to face, it's not going to devolve into that. When you talk to someone face to face, we humanize each other a lot more. So this is what some of these might seem like more anecdotal to what I've experienced in my own life, but this next one I think applies to every single person, and we all know this, but we don't apply it in our own lives. And I wrote down, first thing to realize is that you should never judge yourself or someone else by their social media content. Never compare yourself. Never look at someone's social media and believe that's an accurate depiction of their real life. So I'm a videographer. When you shoot video, the majority of it is shot in 24 frames a second. So that's what they call 24 frames a second is like regular motion. That's what's like pleasing to the eye. Some people it's 30 frames a second. So imagine what makes a video in 1 second is basically 24 pictures that you're seeing very closely. So in 1 second, you're seeing 24 pictures of a person. So imagine when we see an image on social media of this, what we consider a perfect family, like parents that are smiling, kids that are smiling, they all look so fashionable, they look so happy, their house looks perfectly clean and all of that. And we take that, sorry, my foot's falling asleep. We take that tiny frame, which is like a 24th of a second, if that math is correct, and we create our own assumption of their entire lives. They must be perfect parents. Their house must never be clean. I bet their kids listen to them every time they ask them to do something. When we can take one step back, anyone who has kids knows that that's a complete lie. None of us believe that. Yet we convince ourselves of that subconsciously when we're looking at photos. And so I have loved seeing on social media people get more real, like they show their house, and then it's like reality, and you zoom out and everywhere outside of the frame is a total disaster. That's usually the case. People get paid to be influencers and do social media. They get paid for these photos to look good. But in reality, we know the reality is that every parent struggles for their kids to listen to them, to respect them. They struggle for order in their house. Most people's homes, if they have kids, is chaotic. Most people without kids, a lot of people are struggling to make ends meet. So they see these photos of, good looking people doing great things, and they just assume that's how their life always is, when we know consciously, subconsciously that is not true. It's one of the biggest lies I think that social media feeds us, is that we compare ourselves to other people, that our life should be that way. And we see all these trends too. We see a lot of trends of people selling everything they own and becoming like an RV family and traveling the world. And we immediately think, I'm not being a good parent because I'm not doing that for my family. And you got to ask yourself, why? Why do I feel that way? Why do I feel that I have to do what that family is doing? If I'm living a life that I enjoy, if I'm providing for my kids, if they're healthy, if I'm able to feed them, I'm able to provide shelter for them, and I'm able to teach them values that are going to help them in life, that's what's really important. The rest is fluff and extra. Yeah, it's fantastic if you can take your kids around the world and have money to do that. But a person doesn't need that to create a worldview. They don't need that to become a good person. They need someone that's there for them in consistency, and they need to learn values and learn how to apply them. So one of my own weaknesses that has held me back in my life a ton is comparing myself to other people. I've done that through school. I've done that through work. I've done that in social media. Making these kind of untruthful assumptions of somebody else, how they're living their life, and almost always making that assumption that characterizing them as like better than me because they're doing something that I feel I should be doing. I had a call, actually Chad Brown, we're releasing his episode in a couple days, but he talked about that. We fill our life talking about the shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. And we need to ask ourselves, why? Why should I be doing that? because I'm creating this narrative for me of a lot of things that aren't true. And so if I'm totally honest, that's one way that social media has been such a negative aspect in my life over the years, is feeling like I have to compete or compare myself with what I'm seeing on social media. When in reality, I might post a good photo of my family in this moment where everybody's looking at the camera and smiling, and someone might make that false assumption of me as well, that that's how our life always is. But it's so easy to know that that's not how life is for most people. For anybody, let's be honest, anyone who has kids, it's chaos. It's total freaking chaos. And so with it's chaos with these beautiful, uplifting, awesome moments in between that becomes so sacred, because so much of the time is managing this little child with a very underdeveloped, active brain and energy. And so don't compare. If you want to have, so that is the point of this. If you want to have a healthy relationship with social media, you have to dispense with comparing yourself with other people, and understanding that that is just one tiny frame in 1 second of their day, out of hours and hours in one day. The next one, this is like the fifth thing. Russell Brand said a little bit ago, the impulse that is being fulfilled by looking at social media could be fulfilled through genuine human connections. That was said by Russell Brand. And so he made a good point a little bit ago, that we are seeking for these deep connections and these deep things to happen to us on social media, where we could be getting fulfilled in those regards genuinely in our everyday life and just around people that we connect with. And so not treating social media as your way of connecting with the world and your way of connecting with reality and life and for betterment of yourself, not using that as a crutch to try and find those things. How many times have you just been scrolling through social media aimlessly, and you get done and you're almost just sit there like, what was I just doing? Like, why did I just do that? I literally did that last week. I was in my house and I was just kind of scrolling. I had some time to kill. And I kind of just got bummed afterwards. Like, what the hell was that? Like, yeah, I saw a few funny things. I shared a couple things that I thought were funny. I sent to friends and we had a laugh and whatever. But we do that so many times throughout a day that we don't really hang on to those things. Your brain is only processing so much that it kind of just goes in and out, and it's shared, it's gone. It didn't really do much to uplift you. I think those things are great to do, and I do love laughing at the things on social media and stuff. But when we're just aimlessly scrolling, there's so many better things that we could be doing with in the present moment. I could name a million of them. Just sending a simple text, calling a friend, calling a family member, getting some work done that you need to, spending time with your child. I mean, there's so many things. And at no point in this, I gave this disclaimer in the beginning. This isn't me saying to get off social media. It's being conscious of our time, as our time is like the most sacred thing we have. Being conscious of that and not wasting it, not letting people pull our attention away, because that's such an important thing for us to have. This is where we get into the really important stats of social media. And there's one of my favorite books that depict this, that depicts this, is The Coddling of the American Mind, and that's by Jonathan Haidt. I love this book. Check it out if you haven't read it. It's fantastic. If you want a good book that really portrays life from 2007 to the present and how that's affected rates of mental health, suicide, especially youth suicide. I said this, I think, in my very first episode. The reason I wanted to start this podcast for about 4 years or so, I wanted to start this about 2 or 3 years before I actually started it. And the biggest thing that stopped me from doing that is I didn't openly talk about my experience with mental illness or any of that. So I was very ashamed of it, and I was scared of what people would think about it. We moved to Utah, and I started studying the rates of suicide in Utah. And I found that my home state, where I grew up, is number 5 on the top list of states, the suicide rates. Utah being number 5. And that was unsettling to me because I didn't know that. I was really upset about that. But the one that really was so sad for me is in almost every state, if you look up what's the number 1 cause of death among teenagers, it's usually car crashes, which also has gone up from texting and all of that. But in Utah, it was surpassed by suicide rates. So suicide became the number 1 cause of death, surpassing car crashes. And that was just like unacceptable for me. And I finally got to a point where I was just like, I don't care anymore what people think of me. If I can put out an episode, or if I can share some content where somebody thinks twice about taking their life, if they think twice about not feeling worth anything in this life, if a youth, a teenager, a kid, or a parent who's trying to help their kid can hear this and provide some type of resources and make them make a different decision that's not going to impact the rest of their life and their family's life to come, then I'll do this. I don't care what comes out of it. And so that's literally why I just was like, I'm going to start this podcast. I hope somebody hears it and it makes a difference in their life. As me, who has experienced suicidal ideation and has been able to many times in my life come to a point of understanding of, I've said this so many times on the podcast, but my favorite quote that I use all the time is from Nietzsche. And it says, he who has a why can bear any how. So if you have a why to live, you can bear any how, like how you're going to live, how you're going to sustain your life, how you're going to make the changes in your life to live your life. And it became so clear to me what my why was. I found my why, I lived that why, and I wasn't about to make a drastic decision in my life that would take all that away and then affect, leave this path of destruction, this wake of destruction behind me, for everyone else to clean up. And so since 2007 was in, the release of the iPhone, I wish I had a graph or something to pop up. Maybe one will pop up here. I don't know. I'll see if I can post something, but I wish I could see some type of graph from 2010 and you watch the rates of mental illness and suicide rates go up. And they've linked that to this unhealthy relationship that people have with social media, because our kids are getting it at such a young age. A lot of adults are able to deal with it because they've already lived long enough of their life without it. So they've developed these communication skills and ways of conflict resolution without social media, even though adults struggle with it a lot. But the youth that are getting it so young, this is their first experience with social interaction on a bigger level, dealing with people outside of their circle. This is their first glimpse of that. And they might have had some of it when they were little, depending on where you grew up. But that is what is causing this unhealthy relationship, is people are basing their worth on the likes they have, the follows they get, the reactions they get to photos. I mean, people are deleting their photos within 2 minutes of posting it based on how many people like it. That is inherently tied to what they feel is their own self-worth. Oh, not enough people like this, then I must look ugly. I must not be worth it. I mean, someone I just heard on a podcast, like Lana Del Rey is a musician. She super talented, beautiful. She posted this photo of herself that she just narrated a book and posted it. And on this podcast, they said the very first comment was, "You look fat." And so let's say a young teenage girl goes to that post, sees this picture of Lana Del Rey, thinks that Lana Del Rey, sees this photo of Lana Del Rey and thinks she's beautiful, and then sees the first comment, "You look fat." What is the very first thing that teenage female is going to think? Most likely, if Lana Del Rey isn't pretty enough for these people, there's no way that I am, which is completely a lie. First off, and I heard a funny rebuttal to that post was like, one of two things. If Lana Del Rey was overweight and the person said that, that person is rude. If Lana Del Rey isn't overweight and that person said that, that person's a troll. And so those are the ways we need to be thinking about social media is these are just people, most likely, I don't want to say they're unhappy in their life because I don't know who these people are that are popping up and saying cruel things on social media, but people in a good mental state, people happy in their lives, don't tend not to waste a lot of time belittling people on social media. So just think about that, like for a second. Like people in a very healthy state, they're happy with their life, do not waste hours in a day belittling people and making them feel crappy for who they are. Most people feel crappy with who they are, which causes them to want to tear other people down because they're in this way of thinking of who's better than another, and I'm going to tear you down to my level and you shouldn't have more than me and all these things, which I think is a part of a human experience of feeling like someone's getting luckier than you, or they're getting things that you deserve and they didn't get. But these types of reactions, we shouldn't be holding weight to them. If someone on social media just says something super cruel to you, I think unless it's like your mom or your like your best friend, otherwise, why are we even putting weight to that? So these are ways of social media. But check that these are ways of social media being a positive and a negative thing, and finding healthy ways to create it as a positive experience, and trying to weed out these people that are just tearing you down, And if you struggle with that yourself, if you're kind of just floating on someone's page saying negative things and trying to tear down their belief systems or whatever they think and feel, then it's probably time to take a break from social media and doing something more positive with your time. But check out that book by Jonathan Haidt, The Coddling of the American Mind. Fantastic book. He talks all about the history of this, and he talks especially how it's affecting women with bullying. Back in the day, this is where some people, are like, people have always been bullied, but they haven't been bullied in this way. Kids always got to go to school. They got bullied. They got to go home and get away from it. And now they don't. They go home, they get on their phone, they get on Instagram, and they're getting bullied at home. It's just relentless, and it's awful. And so this is ways like, as adults, we need to have a healthy relationship with it. And once we have kids, we need to teach them at such a young age how to have a healthy relationship with this, if you let them have it at all. Like, it's easy for me to say now I have a 9-year-old and I want to believe that I'm not going to let them have access to like social media or any of that stuff until who knows when. I want to say 25, but I can't control what my kids do. But like, at least 16 to 18, I just don't. I mean, Jonathan Haidt, he talks about even 16 years old or whatever, where they can start actually thinking about the effects that this has on it. So anyway, I won't even begin to go into that. I don't feel like I'm a super any authority to talk about that, how you're parenting your kids and all of that when you think is best for social media. But I can say I've talked to so many parents that have older kids that they didn't know what they had when Facebook first came out, or social or Instagram first came out, and they already had teenagers. So of course they're like, yeah, take this, man. You can connect with everybody. You can have more friends. You can have more of that. We didn't realize what we had in that moment. And so a lot of those parents look back and they've told me, I've heard people talk about it, and they've told me personally when we were talking about this, is saying, I wish I would have known of what that was going to do to my child. I wish I could have stopped that and been like, hey, let's wait it. Let's breathe for a sec. Let's see how this affects people. And but sometimes there's no way of knowing when something is so new. We just jump on it because we're excited about it. But all right, so this next part, this is like the 7th thing I've talked about on this list, comes from the book Urban Monk, which is one of my favorite books. I love it. It's written by Pedram Shojai. I think, who knows? I'm probably pronouncing that so wrong. But he got to live like a monk for a long time, years, and then he moved to LA, and now he wrote this book called Urban Monk, and he's applying all these precepts and life lessons that he learned there into living in kind of an urban community. But I took a part of one of his chapters, a paragraph, and I kind of mixed in my own thoughts with it. So this is a mix between, I just want to make it clear, I'm not plagiarizing. Some of this is his and some of it's mine. I kind of just mixed it into my own thoughts with what he was saying as well. So this is part from his book, Urban Monk. And it says, killing time is killing yourself. Time is the greatest gift we have. And if you find yourself trying to fill it with distractions, then the good news is you're rich. You've got right in front of you the only thing you need to drop in and figure out who you are. Instead of ingesting low vibrational content on TV or the internet, you can read, listen to audio programs, podcasts, books, watch meaningful content, grow personally, and cultivate your chi. Every moment is an opportunity to wake up and tap into that nectar. If you feel lonely and isolated, then you must know that the solution is an inside game. Don't look to fill the silence or emptiness with meaningless things to do or other people to waste time with. Fill it with yourself. Breathe into the moment and check in with how you feel. Sense the life force moving through you and notice where it gets stuck. That's your work. On the other side of that, you'll realize how great a gift time really is, and you'll never waste a moment again. This to me is like my life goal, to really harness how important time and how fleeting these moments are. And like he said, once you realize that, you'll never waste a moment again. So I love that book, Urban Monk, all about living in the present. And he does tons of meditations, recipes, living like a monk. And that paragraph always stuck me a ton, because I thought, how much time do I just distract myself? Let's say, like, I'll come home from work sometimes and my family's not home yet. My wife calls me. She's like, hey, we'll be home in 30 minutes. Bring a dinner home, or I had to run some errands, or I'm picking up the kids. And so I'll just have 30 minutes to myself alone at home. A lot of times my normal reaction when I've been working all day is I just lay on my bed, I open Instagram up and I start scrolling. There's been other times where I've sat down, I've wrote in my journal, I've read a book, I've listened to a podcast while doing dishes or cleaning the house, make it a little easier when my wife gets home, one less thing for her to have to do. When I do those things, there's no questioning what you feel better afterwards. Again, I'm not saying you got to get off social media. We all need a break, and there's all types of things on social media that can be beneficial for us. But I think we can all agree you feel better when you're doing something more productive with yourself. Sometimes I feel just laying there, whether it's in meditation, just laying there, letting my mind go free for a bit and not trying to control every little thought I have. And I know people with anxiety, that can be a scary feeling. So if you are in that state, I'm not saying to do that, but when I can just relax and almost let my mind go for a bit, it's almost like just as beneficial as doing so many other things, because you're just letting your mind roam for a bit and you're not trying to control every little thought you have or trying to distract it with every little thing to avoid being alone with yourself. So the next thing, number 8, Gabby Reece is a volleyball Olympian, an athlete, a very inspirational figure. For me, I'm really stoked on her positivity. I love her Instagram, and she's shown how you can make Instagram a very positive thing. She posts a lot of positive content. She's very real. She's also married to Laird Hamilton, who's a professional surfer, entrepreneur. So the two of them are just two powerhouses. They live in Kauai with their family. She talked about a lot the difference between living in New York and living in Hawaii. She's like, you live in New York and you're constantly distracted because of so many people, so many interactions in a day. But you live in Kauai and you're almost forced to sit there with yourself. And so she's like, we meet a lot of people who are just in this state of peace with themselves. And I'm not saying everybody in Kauai, but I've been to Kauai, I've been to Hawaii, and that is the way I feel of this island life of being happy with who you are. A friend of ours that lives there, it's true, but she was joking about, like, we came to this two-way stop, and the person got there way before me, so it was their turn to go. And actually, I don't even think there wasn't even a stop sign, because I remember being so confused. I was living in California at the time, and I remember being so confused. Like, we pulled up, and I was just going to turn left as soon as they passed. And they stopped and didn't even have a stop sign, and they were kind of waving me to go, and I waved them to go, and they waved back to me. And she's like, yeah, just go. And we went, and I was just laughing. And living in California at the time, I was all about get to your place quick, like just get there. And she was laughing, like that's the island mentality, is they're not in a rush to get anywhere. They almost get upset when you're driving too fast. It's just like, enjoy your time, like you're just driving down the road. And so Gabby Reece talked about that difference between, living in New York and living in Hawaii. She said, you're forced to deal with your inner self because of the isolation and quiet. The next thing she talked about, I heard her talk on this podcast, and she said she was talking about women posting provocative photos, getting more likes. She said there's no connection there. We attach our worth to those likes. So she obviously is very fit. She's an athlete. And so she talked about the difference between posting what she considers to be an inspirational post on Instagram versus a picture of herself in a bathing suit. And she's like, naturally, I get way more likes when I post a bathing suit. Way more people comment, like it. I get follows over it. So she's like, for someone who feeds into that becomes their self-worth. That becomes what is important to them. And then if they post a photo in a bathing suit and it gets half the likes, they immediately attach that to their self-worth. Well, I am not as pretty as I was before. I'm ugly. I don't look fit. Like people look more fit than me, and they attach all these things just based on people they don't even know liking or commenting it, even though it could be the time of day you posted it. It could be who's viewing it, all these different factors, algorithms, and all this crap that I don't understand. But we attach worth to that. I do that myself. A while back, I took a year and a half off of social media. It was like one of my favorite things I did, like experimental wise with my mental health, was getting off social media. And the reason I reluctantly got back on is how it was affecting my business. My business started going down because I get new clients through Instagram. I do collaborations through Instagram. That's how I find a lot of guests for this podcast. I mean, those are the good things about social media. But I remember taking that break. And naturally, when I got back on, because I hadn't interacted with social media for so long, I remember making a post. And I remember before, like, who knows, whatever following I had and whatever likes, I remember when I got off, I lost like 1,000 followers and immediately was like, oh no, like that's going to affect my business and all of that. And I remember getting back on and making a post, and where before, who like, whatever, who cares, whatever likes it got. But I remember making a post and it literally got like not even a fifth of the likes I got before. And I remember immediately attaching my self-worth to that. Like, oh, my work sucks now. Like, people aren't engaging with it. They don't like it. Like, they don't like my page anymore. And immediately taking that personally, as if my own personal friends just told me they didn't want to be friends with me anymore. And like, when you take a step back and think about that, it's really silly. So Gabby Reece talks about that, about attaching our self-worth to followers and likes, and how unhealthy that is, especially when it comes to young females figuring out who they are in this world, and 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls posting provocative photos of themselves and attaching self-worth to that, because of course more guys are going to like it if they're posting that, and then they post like an inspirational quote and they get like half the likes and immediately think, well, I can't do that anymore because people don't like that. I need to post what people like. But it's your life, it's your content, and you control the message that you're putting out there. So if that's what you want, then great, do that. But in reality, I'm not some guru or monk or whatever, but what Gabby was talking about is like, if you are truly seeking for self-acceptance and to be happy with your life, that's what social media can be, is posting positive things that are inspirational to each other and not attaching your self-worth to the likes and the feedback that you get. Especially if you are posting provocative photos of yourself. She was saying it's pretty hard for undeveloped minds not to attach their self-worth to that. So she was basically just sending that message out, and she said she had conversations with her own kids about that, of kind of the inherent danger of going down that path, because all people grow up, all of our bodies change. So we have to know that that is something that is finite, that isn't going to be there forever. So it is something to be conscious of, is how long is this going to go? Is this a healthy route for me? Is this a direction I want to go for a long time? So for me in the beginning, I remember Instagram just being so rad, because I was way into videography and photography. So Instagram in the beginning was all about pretty photos of landscapes, and following photographers and seeing beautiful content, people posting photos like out the plane window of clouds, and that's like what it was in the beginning, and it was so fun. And then at some point it just turned into a lot of awesome things, a lot of funny stuff. There's cats, there's dogs, there's people doing stupid stuff, there's kook of the day, people crashing, there's Jerry of the day, people falling skiing, like there's so many funny accounts, but it's turned into this huge different thing than what it was before. And one that's full of polarizing conversations and opinions and all great things that need to be brought to light. Lots of social justice things that are really important for people to know about, causes that are important to know about, but also devolving conversation. And so I think if we're trying to have a healthy relationship with social media, we need to approach social media understanding what it is. And I've fallen into that so many times, engaging in the lower conversations that aren't really going anywhere. And I always get to an end like, was that necessary? Is it necessary for me to be jumping into this conversation? Is it necessary for me to be arguing my point, which most likely isn't going to change this person's mind? And I think there's a debate to have about that. I think it's an interesting debate. But I don't think many people are going on to social media to change their mind about something, but they're going on to change minds. Number 10, the next one is also from the Daily Dad back in July. This email I got that said, don't let people steal your attention. That goes in line with the things we talked about before about our time is one of the most precious things we have. Our attention is one of the most precious things we have. So why give it to things that don't render positive results? Give our attention to the people in our lives that matter, to building businesses. Give our attention to building platforms and organizations that are positive for other people, things that will be a net positive in this world. Like I think about that all the time. Like when I leave this earth, did I leave a net positive or a net negative? You know, and that might be hard to quantify, but am I putting out more positivity into this world than I'm taking? You know, or am I mean, maybe that's not the right way, but am I putting out more positive energy than I'm putting out negative? And so our attention and time is one of the most important things we have, so we can decide what we're giving our time and attention to. And so I wrote down, my wife and I got into this conversation 2 nights ago and then again last night, all about social media and what we give our attention to. And so I wrote down how many arguments and crosswords resulted from taking this all so seriously. So how many relationships have devolved because of someone stating their opinion and someone being uncomfortable with it? Not just arguments, but how many things have we been upset about just from something we saw on social media? And so I think social media is great to get ideas out there. I think it's great to share your political opinion. I think it's great to share religious beliefs, philosophy. This is where conversations can happen. But where it's not a good place is to pretend that a debate can be healthy 100% of the time. It's just not going to happen. People don't come to have their minds changed. They see your post and a lot of times they engage to change your mind, and which is a debate, but we're not coming at it with healthy intentions. A lot of times debates are sprung and started with an insult, which is the worst way to communicate with somebody, is by starting by insulting them. Usually it's best to find common ground. And that's what we tend to do in person. We tend to be like, I can see where you came. I can see where you got there, but I disagree with it because of this. And that's just my opinion. That's what we tend to do when we're in person. Like I said before, so much of our conversation is body language, what our eyes are doing, what our body's doing, if we're open to conversation, if we're not, if we're closed off. And you can read that and you can adjust what you're saying based on that, because we can't read intentions, you know, but we can read what somebody's body language is doing. We can see their eyes. We can see how they're feeling about the conversation in that moment. When you're writing things on social media, you don't hear their voice. You don't see their body language. So you're reading it in your assuming tone that they're reading it in, which comes from your own biases, your own idea of their way of thinking, you know? So if they're, if someone's disagreeing with you about something like politics, you're immediately assuming because they disagree with you that they're coming at it with malice, which they might be, you know, because it's such a polarizing topic right now. But we're unable to see where that person's coming from, and they're not able to see where you're coming from as well as if you were in person. And so we get so brave and, you know, the keyboard warrior or whatever, we say things that we would never say if we were with them in person, because we tend to devalue and dehumanize people when we're not there face to face with them. And so these friendships kind of devolve and they wither away. And I think that's sad, because it's great for us to have different opinions. And that's where social media can be fantastic, is to, I've been exposed to so many philosophies and so many ways of thinking on all different levels of things, whether it's political, philosophical, religious, so many ideas I've gained and learned through social media, learning what other people believe, books that they've read, and then reading those books. So those are all the positive things about social media. But allowing our conversations to devolve into chaos and trying to hash out heavy topics in just a few words and trying to get rebuttals and not even reading what somebody's writing back to you fully and trying to understand where they're coming from, but just thinking about what you're going to say back to them is just a very ineffective way to converse. And so the point of all that is if you find yourself on social media engaging in these conversations, we have to understand there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you like to do, if you get off social media and you're like, I did a lot of good today, I argued with 100 people and whatever. If you truly feel that that's your part in it, that's great. But I think we all have to step back and ask ourselves, is it healthy the way we're interacting with social media? Is it healthy the way we're interacting with people? Could I be doing something better with social media? I'm talking about all this from a state of mental health. I know that when I engage in these things and I can tell it's devolving conversation, I don't mind conflict at all. What I don't like is I don't like seeing people devalue friends and family that mean a lot to them because their ideas are different from them. I don't like that at all. And so that's where social media for me becomes very complicated, that I don't want to engage on it in that level. And so when I took that break for like a year and a half or however long it was, when I got back on, I just said social media is going to be totally different for me. And and it kind of has and hasn't many things, but I immediately kind of deleted everybody I was following and I just started fresh. I started with just things that make me laugh, comedians, and then slowly kind of restarted following friends. Even some friends were like, what the hell, dude, you unfollowed me? And I'm like, no, I kind of just cleared everything out and I'm just starting fresh. And so that happened to a few friends, but it wasn't that I wasn't into what they were doing in their life. It was just a reset for me, like follow things that if I'm going to get on here, it better make me laugh or it better inspire me to go do something. It's not just for me to be distracted. And as I followed more people, you do fall into that it is just a distraction and all of that, which it definitely is needed at times. But I'm constantly reevaluating my relationship with social media because I want it to be a positive thing for me mentally. I don't want to walk away from social media feeling like I'm not as good as these people that I'm engaging with, or that I need to, for whatever reason, I'm not a good person. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of connection or feeling regret for something I said. I just want it to be positive interaction. And I think some people would argue, well, you're creating kind of an echo chamber for yourself, which I think can be true. So I do tend to, follow a lot of things that are outside of my belief systems and my thought processes because I do like being challenged on those things. But I think there is a difference between that and having something that's just constantly nagging on you, or something that is just making you feel crappy as a person and all of that. So it's just things we need to assess. I just wanted to say, I just have a couple more, but the one thing I wanted to say in the conversation with my wife and I that we had is when something happens on social media, you see something on social media that just like, you're just like, I got to say something, or that's just like rubbed me the wrong way or whatever reason, or that's making you feel anxious and that's making you feel depressed. Take a step back and think about that. You are upset because you saw something that somebody posted. Now, I think we were talking about this the other night, is whether you see that or not, it happened. The person said that thing. It's like the idea of like the tree falling in the forest. If nobody heard it, does it actually make a sound? So we chose to go on social media and see that post. We also chose how we reacted to it. So not only are we on social media, we're choosing to be offended. We're choosing to react to that post. First off, we're choosing to see it. Then we're choosing to have a reaction to it. We're choosing to be offended by it. And it could be something awful. They could have said something to you personally that's very hurtful. But what I mean by that is, like, think how many things happen in the world. And this might be getting too deep. I think about this stuff a lot, so it might not even make sense. But I think about this a lot. Like, how many things are happening right now, this second, every single day, that I'm not seeing, that isn't. I'm not saying to just put your blinders onto the world and not react to it, but how many things happen that if we saw would steal our time, steal our attention, and be unhelpful for us, where if we do have plenty of time away from it, plenty of time filling our day with healthy things, how different our day would be. So this is what I do now with social media. I got off for a long time and I realized I can't do that with my business unless I could afford to hire somebody to run all my social media. And then your voice still isn't there. So it's tough. I had to make that decision to get back on. So what I do now, and people are going to be like, freak, that's like a lot of work to do it that way. But because we have the podcast and messaging and things like that, and I don't want to neglect people that for resources, that ask questions or whatever the case be. We also run a business, so we have questions with that a lot. And so I will get on, like, not first thing in the morning. I like, that's a very conscious choice, is I don't look at that first thing. I usually try to go to the gym or get up and do breakfast and all that stuff. And so I'll check it for the first time. This is ideal. There's plenty of times I don't do this, but ideal is you wait, I check it. It's never on my phone. Like, it's not on my phone, Instagram. So I check, I get on, I check it when I'm done with it. Like, I do my messaging, I'll check a few things, I'll get off, I delete it off my phone. So you might be like, holy hell, that is like too much work for me to do. So if I'm thinking like, I want to check Instagram, I want to look at this, I have to re-download it, re-sign in, do all my settings again and go. And that's a total pain, and that doesn't work for you. That's totally fine. But I don't think about it. And it makes me realize how many times I get on social media for no other reason than to distract myself when I really have other stuff I need to do. So then I check it one or two more times in the day when I get on. And it is tough when you have to make a post, like you make a post and there's interaction with it or whatever, especially with the podcast. Like, I do want to be present for people, especially if they're having a hard time or have questions like, what do you do for this with anxiety or depression? Like, I do want to be present. So that is where I try to make an effort to check it a few times a day. But each time I get off of it, I delete it. And so that's where I'm at now. What I did in the past is, if you have an iPhone, I'm sure Android does this too, but you can set time limits for apps. And so I had a 15-minute time limit on Instagram. And then if you hit that, it kind of locks up your app, but you can easily be like, more time, 10 more minutes or no time limit for today. And so once I kind of got out of that habit, I started just clicking that. And then I was like, what's the point of this? So that's what I do now, is I delete it off my phone, and then I have to put it back on my phone to use it again. So that sounds crazy, but for my mental health, like, I don't want to be spending more time on there than I need. I don't want to aimlessly scroll through. I want it to be an enjoyable, almost like what do you call that? Like kind of like a bonus, not just like a thing that's always available to me. It's like, oh yeah, I could check this. I could see like, yeah, what friends are doing, or I could look at some funny posts or something like that. So going with what I said before about these conversations on social media that we're choosing to engage with, we're choosing to see, and we're choosing to be offended by them. The first thing we have to learn is how to have constructive conversations if we're going to engage with somebody. We tend to think that positive interactions can't happen on social media. And I think it's harder on Facebook because you have more and more people. I tend to, like, if I want to have a constructive conversation with somebody, I usually direct message them. I don't do it in the post, because then you have who knows who jumping in and getting pissed and all this stuff. So I've actually had really positive encounters with people, whether it's politics, religion, through direct messaging. Just like, hey, can you help me understand how you got there? Because I think it's a really interesting point. And I don't personally believe that way, but I would love to hear how you got there. And I won't give examples on here because this isn't a podcast where I'm trying to talk about politics or anything like that. But there's literally been things that I disagree with that I reach out to a buddy and say, hey, like, I don't personally feel the way you do, but I would love to hear how you get there. And a lot of times we realize we actually have way more in common than we don't. I'm just looking at it from a different perspective than he is or she is. And it's been rad to be able to have these open conversations. And then we always end like, hey man, I see it differently than you, but I love you. I appreciate your perspective. And I literally had a conversation the other night where I felt completely different from a girl I know. And we had a conversation. We ended up talking. And at the end, we both started laughing. Like, who knew our conversation would go here? And we didn't leave like completely flipping and changing everything we did, but I had more appreciation, and she had more appreciation for each other's perspectives. Like, and we both admitted that to each other. Like, I see where you're coming from. And I appreciate you reaching out. Thanks. And so these conversations can be had, but we really have to be conscious of how we're communicating with people. We can't dehumanize somebody because they think differently than us politically. We can't, dehumanize or devalue somebody because they have a different faith system than we, or if we have no faith at all, we can't, or vice versa. If we're very religious and someone's not, we can't put them down or think that they're any less, and vice versa. If you're non-religious and look down on people that are religious, I think that the human experience where we're bringing so many people and so many different backgrounds and thoughts together, that's where it all collides in social media. We have to approach it that way as people from all different backgrounds. So that's hard because you might be trying to do that and the person you're engaging with is not. And so that's usually, if I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody, that's why I usually try to do it direct message, because it immediately lowers kind of the weaponry and the guards and stuff, and you can have a good conversation. But overall, if I'm talking about something very difficult with somebody, I prefer to do it over the phone, and even better if I can do it with them in person. And so if we want to have these healthy relationships on social media, but someone's not willing to have that with us, I mean, it might just be time to freaking mute them or unfollow them or do whatever makes it a healthy experience for you. You can sometimes even say like, hey, I've had these conversations with people like, hey man, we obviously see these things very different, but I respect our friendship more than this, whatever this conversation is devolving into. And so, yeah, man, maybe we just agree to disagree at this point. And I've literally had those conversations with people because I don't want to lose a friendship because somebody believes differently than me. Learning that constructive conversation is difficult online, but we need to make the effort to make it more of an enjoyable place for us to interact with people. The very last thing I'm going to say, I've studied so much, especially in that book, Coddling of the American Mind. I've studied these effects of social media on youth because these are the first generations popping up that are born with social media. They've had it their entire lives. They don't remember a time not having Facebook, or a time that it didn't exist. People, like I remember not having the internet in my house, and then I remember getting dial up, and then you get on the phone to call somebody and it makes that crazy like sound. And people who are older, or older, like people who remember not having the internet, there's a big difference between people that don't remember that. And so we need to understand how this is affecting our kids because they don't know the difference. And so they just see friends, on social media, and that's the norm. And they're comparing their lives to their friends' lives online. I wanted to talk about one thing, and that's from Colin Karcher. And I'm so sad to hear of him passing away recently. He was like such an icon in the social media world of making it a much more positive place to be, and to getting so many kids who were being bullied, who had suicidal ideation, so many kids that were just having such a negative experience in their life because of social media. So many of those kids just gladly got rid of their social media accounts, got flip phones, and he did so many great things in that world of people that were struggling in the social media world, and really shed a lot of light on the destructive nature of it. And I'm so sad to hear that he passed away recently because he was such an example, but I'm grateful to know that his legacy is going to be carried on. But one of the greatest things I learned hearing his story, that he decided to do this whole thing, is he was getting into social media, and he said that his child started becoming very like kind of deviant, almost like not responding in the family, just kind of always on edge. And he was just getting short with her. I think it was his daughter, he said. And he just got so fed up with it. It just kind of happened day after day. And he finally said he just shouted at her and was like, "What is wrong with you?" And she just shouted back at him, "You're always on your phone." And he said that was the instant he just completely froze and realized how much time he had been dedicating to social media when he's at home, at dinner, always engaging with this, because he started getting a following. And he's like, I immediately, from that second on, decided to dedicate my life to making social media, to helping kids engage with this stuff more healthy, whether it's get them off it entirely or to completely see themselves in a different light, and that they don't value themselves based on likes and follows and all of that. And so it took his daughter, having that experience with his daughter, for him to realize that. And so if we're asking ourselves, how can we have this be a positive experience for our kids? How can we protect them against the negative sides of social media? Is we have to do that first as adults. Parents are struggling with that as much as kids are right now, to be completely distracted by social media, be engaging in social media where our kids are trying to talk to us while, they're doing their homework, and we're just sitting there scrolling Instagram and, half-ass engaging with them and things like that. If we want them to have a positive experience, then we have to start with ourselves. Whether there's any validity to this or not, if there's any science backing it up, you can feel people's energy. Have you ever walked into a room after somebody's been like fighting or arguing, and you can just feel this tension? Like it's in the air, this like energy. We carry that energy around, and our parents are, or rather our kids are paying attention to that energy that we're putting out in our home. Are we completely disengaged from the family, staring at social media? Are we completely disengaged from our partners, from our friends? When we go out to eat, I always laugh, and I've totally fallen into this, but you go out to eat and the entire table is staring at their phones. Like, what is that? And why do we do that? We took the time to leave the house and come out to dinner, and yet we all get on our phones. And I'm saying that in a non-judgmental way because I've done that too. But what energy are we putting out there with our family members? Are we engaged with them? Are we having conversations? Or are we constantly just trying to distract ourselves from the present moment? So if we're expecting our kids to have a healthy relationship with social media, we have to start with ourselves. And again, I know I've gone way out in the weeds on this episode, but for me, it's all about making the choice. Is social media a positive thing for you? If it is, just keep doing what you're doing. If you're using it to be distracted from your life, you've got to make a change, because that can only go on for so long until it becomes a very unhealthy thing for you mentally. And ask yourself, is there any changes you can make to the way you engage with social media so that these statistics of mental health don't just keep trending up? We have to be able to figure out a way to make social media, because it's here to stay. Engagement online, it's connecting us with the entire world. It's not going anywhere. I mean, I have a friend in Colombia that I haven't seen in 12 years, and the only way we engage with each other is Zoom and Facebook Messenger. So for that reason, I'm insanely grateful for it. But we have to ask ourselves, if there are things, if we are getting off social media and feeling less than, like we're not a good person, like we suck, like we're ugly, like we're terrible parents, because parents are taking cute photos, and we see cute photos and assume that we're not being good parents because we're not, traveling around the world in an RV with them for a year, or doing all these things that we assume we're supposed to do because people are getting attention for doing them, or this obsession with being influencers and famous, which I have friends that are influencers and they have great, healthy relationships with it, and they get paid and they can make a living doing that. So there's nothing wrong with that. But understanding what effect social media is having on us, whether it's positive or negative. So for me, this podcast is obviously all about mental health. And so my main concern is that people are positive, are viewing themselves positive, and not looking at social media and making, and it makes them feel less than, that they're not worthy, that people would be better off without them. I mean, so much bullying has happened on social media where people literally take their lives because they believe the stuff that people tell them when they engage on social media. So it can't be that for us. We have to distance ourselves from anything on social media that isn't benefiting us, that is just making us feel less than. So there's lots of ways that we can make that better. Reducing our time on it, for one. It can't be this thing that we just use all day, every day, unless that's your job, of course. But we have to interact with our surroundings and ourself, dealing with it outside of social media. We have to know who we are and figure that out. And we're not going to figure that out just by basing it off of how many followers and likes we get on social media. The next thing is we can just use it for positive things. So many people are doing rad businesses. So many people are just using their accounts for funny memes, which I love. Using it for funny stuff, or just using it as a journal. I mean, I know people that have a business account and then they have a private personal account that they just use as a journal. Then you can print it off in books and have it at your house and all this stuff. So there's so many ways to engage with this positively. And so I think we have to be ongoing, continually assessing how we're using it and if it's a good thing for us or not. And I highly recommend taking breaks from social media. Highly recommend it. And or maybe just one day a week is no social media. It's amazing when you're disconnected, like you don't have this pulse on what everybody is thinking and saying and doing. You actually have your own thoughts about things, and you can be with your family and your friends and your loved ones, and you can experience it not like personally, instead of just engaging through social media. So to wrap all this up, there's no doubt that social media has been a force for good and bad, but there's also no doubt the research shows, the statistics show that due to the advent of social media, the iPhone, suicide rates have increased, mental illness has increased, the negative ways that people view themselves has increased. And you could say that to the other end of the spectrum too. More businesses have been created, more great, positive nonprofits have been able to be formed because of it. So there has been this blast of kind of across the two ends of the spectrum of good and bad things that have happened. But for me, if I'm seeing increased rates of suicide, if I'm seeing more bullying happen with youth, more youth taking their lives, more youth struggling with anxiety and depression, then we got to do something about that. We have to find a way to help people, and adults too. All this is happening with adults too, but so much more with youth because they haven't lived a life without it. So this is like what their worldview is. And so we have to make it more positive for ourselves and for the youth in the world for this thing to continue to churn. We can't just be happy and comfortable with increased rates of mental illness taking place. So figure out a way to make it positive for yourself, whether that's taking a break from it or just finding new ways to engage with it. But as far as mental health is concerned, for me, it's all about self-care, self-analysis, how things are affecting you, ways that you can engage in things more positively, especially conversation, the way you view yourself. Don't base it on likes and follows and comments and the way people react to it. Shouldn't be invested in your inherent self-worth. That should be more based on what you put into the world and how you view yourself and how you take care of yourself and just loving the people around you and the communities that you create. But we all have inherent self-worth. We're all worthy of love. We're all worthy of receiving goodness, giving goodness. And sometimes that's not portrayed well on social media. It's so much easier to devalue each other and dehumanize each other. So let's put that good out into the world. Hopefully that good will come back. But I'm just wishing you all the best. There's been times where I do get down when I get looking at social media and I compare myself to other people and I get into these ruts of thinking, and then I've just wasted time. So then I get stuck in those ruts thinking about that. But I learned something rad from Chad Brown. Again, his episode is gonna drop soon. It'll already be out by the time you listen to this. But we talked so much about the shoulds, and I should have this, and I should think this way, and I should be this. And he's always like, until now. Like, you say those things and then say until now. And it doesn't have to be that way forever. You can say that was the way it happened until now, and now it's going to be different. So I wish you all the best. I love you guys, and I thank you so much for the support for the podcast. I want these to be resources for people. So I know this was kind of a long, lengthy discussion about social media, and it could really, it fills books and all this stuff. So take care of yourselves. Be positive out there. Take care of those around you, and take care of yourself. Thanks so much for listening to this episode.